All right, folks, I wanted to share a couple of articles with you guys here and some important developments regarding Russian and Chinese cooperation militarily. As a matter of fact, they've come out and announced that they're planning enormous military events and cooperation. And first, I want to start with this piece. It was reported yesterday that the Russian President Vladimir Putin and, of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping had been scheduled to meet today, June the 8th, 2017, and the piece highlighted the fact that the Russian president planned to meet with his Chinese counterpart in Astana to discuss the situation on the Korean peninsula. And I've said it, folks, many times. When push comes to shove, I believe Russia and China are going to take a stance that opposes the U.S. and their allies, and perhaps even side with North Korea, as that is lies on borders with China as well as Russia. And it's been well documented, the militarization of both borders in recent days, weeks, and months, and what have you, since this whole situation over there in the Korean Peninsula region of the Asia Pacific has continued to escalate. And it mentions that Russian President Vladimir Putin plans to meet with his Chinese counterpart in Astana to discuss the situation on the Korean Peninsula, according to the Russian presidential aide Yuri Ushakov, and what he told reporters on Wednesday. Now, during the meeting, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping will discuss bilateral cooperation in the SCO format. The SCO is a Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and as well as they will focus on the recent developments on the Korean Peninsula, according to the Russian presidential aide there, Yuri Ushakov. And the two leaders may discuss other issues, it said, including those related to the regional and international agenda. But the talks will be held today, June the 8th, on the sidelines of the SCO summit there in Astana, according to Ushakov. And he reaffirmed that the Chinese leaders' visit to Moscow is scheduled for July 3rd and 4th, coming up next month. And with this in mind, these two heads of state, the Russian president and the Chinese president, Putin and Xi, will have a brief meeting on the sidelines of this SCO summit over there in Astana. So that was reported yesterday, and now they had met today briefly, I assume. And this report had been released by Yahoo News earlier today. At least that's where I've got it pulled up. I'm sure it was widely reported on. But as you see here, Russia and China plan enormous military events and cooperation after successful South China Sea drill. You have to forgive me, I got the window in the office here open, so if you hear some vehicles, I apologize. But folks, this strengthening of ties and cooperation between Russia and China has been long documented. It's been going on for some time. I've been talking about it for years now. And you know, it relates to many end-time Bible prophecies. Specifically, the first one that comes to mind is Daniel 11 and the kings of the East. And that's Russia and China are key players in end-time Bible prophecy, part of the kings of the East there in the Daniel 11 prophecy. And of course, you know, when you're talking about, you can get into Gog and Magog, you can get into all kinds of other things that are going to happen, and I'll be talking a lot about these end-time prophecy series that I plan to at least start doing very, very soon. But again, folks, key players in end-time Bible prophecy, doing exactly what the Bible says would happen. And the piece here that I'll link you guys up with talks about how Russia and China are planning enormous and important joint military events in their future after a meeting in which the countries agreed a military roadmap until 2020. So this is in the very near future here, just in the next 2-3 years, right? And the superpowers completed a mass naval drill there in the disputed South China Sea back in September. And in a quote here from the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, in what he told Interfax news agency at a meeting with his Chinese counterpart in Kazakhstan, he said, and I quote, "It is important that Russia and China are ready to defend the world with mutual efforts and strengthen international security." And Shoigu went on to say that our experts have prepared a roadmap for development in the military sphere between Russia and China in the years of 2017 through to 2020. And of course, the Russian defense minister there, Sergei Shoigu, released these comments while sitting alongside his Chinese general, Chang Wanquan. And the Chinese general told Interfax that both countries were planning enormous, important events, but did not give further details on what these would entail. He added, in recent years, under the personal guidance of our heads of state, the level of cooperation and trust between the armed forces of China and Russia have continuously increased. The scope of our cooperation is constantly expanding, and the trend of developing military cooperation maintains a good trajectory. Russia and China, it goes on to say, have sought to strengthen their political and military ties in recent years, as well as promote their jointly led alliance known as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, particularly among Central Asian states. The so-called Shanghai Five is loosely aligned on political, economic, and military issues and serves somewhat as a counterweight to NATO. Goes on to mention that though the countries were allied in the Soviet era, extent of their cooperation since the communist bloc's collapse provokes skepticism among some analysts who question whether the two countries trust each other enough for any long-term political ventures. However, since losing influence with many European countries since 2014 over the conflict there in Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin has shown a sustained effort in courting leaders and economies in the Asia-Pacific regions, and the two countries launched an 8-day naval drill in the South China Sea back in September of last year, with Russia, by implication, showing support for Beijing's claims in the region and desire for the U.S. to stop criticism of its moves. The drill made annual joint naval practices a recurring feature in Russia and China's military calendars after having conducted a joint drill also in the Mediterranean Sea prior to the drill over in the South China Sea. And so, folks, again, this is very biblical. Key end-time players here in the end-time Bible prophecy. You've got, as I said, in Daniel 11, Russia and China making up a large portion of the kings of the East, along with other nations. I'll be talking a lot about that. And we're going to see a continuous military cooperation between these nations and other nations there in the region. And not only that, but also economic cooperation is going to increase on massive levels. And, you start talking about China's One Road or China's Silk Road project that they want to link up on this massive economic project that is prophesied in Isaiah 23, and I'll be talking about that. I believe it's Isaiah 22 and 23, about a massive Euro and Asian, or Eurasian, massive trade bloc or economic agreement between many nations of Europe, Asia, and what have you, and of course Russia, China, Germany is going to play a massive role in this according to that prophecy. However, I don't want to rabbit tail too much here, folks. key events in end-time prophecy taking place on a daily basis as the signs of the times continue to unfold. We're watching the kings of the East here of Daniel 11 coming together, as we see in this report here, and I'll link you up to it in the description box below. Russia and China are planning enormous military events in cooperation after their latest successful military drills there in the South China Sea. So until next time, folks, this is Brother Joey signing off. God bless you guys, and as always, much love. They've come out and announced that they're planning enormous military events and cooperation. And first, I want to start with this piece. It was reported yesterday that the Russian... All right, folks, I wanted to share a couple of articles with you guys here and some important developments regarding Russian and Chinese cooperation militarily. As a matter of fact, peninsula. And I've said it, folks, many times. When push comes to shove, I believe Russia and China are going to take a stance that opposes the U.S. and their allies. And the piece highlighted the fact that the Russian president planned to meet with his Chinese counterpart in Astana to discuss the situation on the Korean President Vladimir Putin and, of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping had been scheduled to meet today, June the 8th, 2017.